Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señoras oyentes de Usa la Radio, están escuchando la Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable. Desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, from the city of brotherly love, les habla Fernando Mendez. Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. Y como de costumbre, tenemos noticias locales, nacionales, internacionales. Primero que todo, una tragedia en México, un accidente que ha causado la muerte de 55 personas y tal vez más, y muchos heridos. Así que esto se trata de los problemas allí de inmigrantes en la frontera. Vamos a ver qué detalles nos dan más tarde, pero ese es el titular. Esto se debe a apiñamiento en la frontera de gentes que quieren entrar a Estados Unidos, quieren emigrar a Estados Unidos y están apiñados ahí en la frontera. Esto ha causado problemas en ambos lados. Al otro lado de la frontera, por supuesto, como siempre, hay estas celdas, ¿no?, temporales donde los ponen mientras tramitan sus papeles. Vamos a ver qué sucede con eso. En todo caso, pues ese es uno de los titulares del día de hoy. Tenemos otras cosas de City and State que nos han llegado. Esto de, entre ellos, una de esas sorpresas, ¿no?, la cantidad de gente que está entrando para su candidatura para el Senado, para reemplazar este curul que ha quedado vacío. Y entonces, pues uno de ellos, este señor doctor Mehmet Oz, Celebrity Heart Surgeon, una celebridad, un médico famoso. Se hizo famoso en el programa de Oprah Winfrey, se hizo famoso luego por su propio programa hablando de la salud, aunque algunas de sus recomendaciones no son aceptadas por la comunidad médica en general, porque, bueno, como muchos de estos teledoctores tratando de vender snake oil to the people, la fórmula mágica, el ingrediente que va a cambiar la vida de la gente, etc. Es algo parecido a lo que hacen los charlatanes en todas partes. Así que él no tiene mucho crédito, además que estaba alineado, tal parece, con otras de las malas instrucciones que nos dio el expresidente y su médico. Recordemos que el médico de este presidente nos dijo que él era un superhombre, el mejor estado físico de ningún otro presidente. Vamos a ver si hablamos de un tema más tarde, un tema sobre lo que está pasando en Pensilvania, con esto de la distribución de distritos de nuevo, redistricting. Y hay controversia, como siempre. Estas cosas no pasan sin controversia, sobre todo en esta ciudad. Y vuelvo a señalar, como lo he hecho varias veces, uno de los grandes problemas que tenemos aquí en la ciudad. Uno de mis colegas ha señalado que hay una falta de equidad en cuanto al modo como se ha distribuido el poder en esta ciudad, cómo se juzgan muchos elementos en esta ciudad que tiene que ver más con el partidismo que con la justicia, tienen más que ver con algo que protegen la gente en el poder, los republicanos en el poder. Como ya hemos visto, a través del país están haciendo eso, tratando de cambiar las elecciones. Bueno, tal parece que se nos va a unir nuestro amigo Pedro Rodríguez, activista. Don Pedro,
buenos días, buen
buenos
comienzo
días.
de la semana, señor Fernando. ¿Cómo le va?
Para la gente que no conoce a don Pedro, él ha sido miembro de la administración del señor Kenny. No sé si estás todavía con la administración o ya te has separado, no sé.
No, me separé en el verano,
Sí.
Porque pienso estar muy activo en la selección del nuevo alcalde de Filadelfia. Tú sabes que la campaña comienza en un par de semanas.
Okay, so you don't want to let go of the trough, of the city trough. Está
Absolutely
ahí,
not. Why would I do that?
Que te siga alimentando el Estado. Okay,
Exactly.
está
Why
muy
would I
bien.
do that?
Entonces,
No. The city of Philadelphia is at a critical stage. There was some progress made, but with the pandemic, the disturbances, social justice and racial justice that happened during the summer of last year, there were many setbacks to the agenda of progress, and a lot of things unraveled. So I think the new leadership of the city needs to really be more surgical and extensive in redoing a bunch of things to make sure that we have some sense of dignity and equity in our city when it comes to the majority of the population.
one of the lack of equity in this city is the fact that the Democrats have been controlling the city for over 6 decades and not making room for any opposition, really.
Well, I mean, you
I know you lined up with the Democrats, so I want to see how you defend that.
No, there is opposition emerging in Philadelphia. You can see the election of Kendra Brooks from the Working Family Party.
Yeah.
As an emerging minority party in the city.
It'll be a third party, not the Republican Party.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's. I will say that when it came to the citywide vote, the Working Families Party has more support than the Republican Party when it comes to that level of electoral politics. And the Republican Party has never been an opposition force in Philadelphia for decades.
Since 1953, to be exact.
No, I mean, at the beginning, they were opposition. They acted as an opposition, but they haven't done so in decades. I mean, it's a collection of individuals. It's pretty much like the Democrats are, but the Republicans is a collection of individuals. For a time, they were run like a feudal system, with a chief on the top and a bunch of soldiers and
Yeah, until the unions took over, you mean?
I don't think which unions you're talking about.
Like your pal Doherty, who's now in prison.
Well, he's not in prison. I think he's been.
If he's not, he should be anyway. So listen, for those of you who might remember my previous incarnation on the radio, Don Pedro was part of that show on Sol Radio, and he was always in charge of representing the wrong side of the issues. So I'm glad to see him back here. So
yeah, well, I haven't stopped representing the right side of history. So I'm very proud of that. So, by the way, that was one of the best radio shows in Philadelphia. I mean, we dominated on Saturday morning for that hour. We dominated the Arbitrum ratings. Yeah, so a lot of people listen to it.
So, Pedro, what do you think of this redistricting? What's going on with that?
It's an ugly, ugly sancocho. You know what a sancocho is? It's a beef
Yes, I
stew
know.
with chicken stew.
It's a goulash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very ugly. It's very ugly. It's not. This is beyond making sausages. It's there are several competing agendas there. And in one side, you want at the congressional level, Pennsylvania lost one seat.
Right.
So one of the members of the assembly of the congressional delegation will be redistricted out. They think it's going to be Colonel Lamb from Western PA around the
Okay,
Pittsburgh.
Pedro, for people who don't understand why we would lose a seat, what was the reason for that?
So, according to the Constitution, every 10 years after the census is done, state take that information and they redraw the maps for congressional boundaries, and they also do it for state legislative seats for the Senate, and then in Philadelphia we also do it using the same information. We used to do it for the city council district seats, for which we have 10. The Constitution has a set number of seats in Congress. It's 435 total. And so the math has to fit that number of seats. And what happens every 10 years after the tabulation of the census comes out, state gain seats because they gain population, state lose seats because they lost population. In our case, we lost population. So the legislators in each state are mandated to use that information what they have, with the numbers of people they have, and redraw the boundaries of the maps. What has happened in places this is done in a partisan basis, like the party that controls the legislature does it. They try to make the seats by picking the voters. It's like, I don't like Fernando and his politics, so my district are going to make sure that he's out. By the way, that happens to me and to Ben Ramos once. There was a state legislator in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, who didn't like none of us, and we live across the street from each other. So he made sure that division, the other division, was out of his district, because he was afraid that we, were going to run against him.
Is he still talking to you?
Yeah, he said hello. I saw him the other day.
Yeah, right.
I'm a civil guy, Fernando. You know that.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I say hello to everybody. So for people who don't understand, and it's a messy process. And then the problem is that once it is done, it stays like that for 10 years until the next census.
Right.
In some cases, like happened in Pennsylvania, because the maps in Pennsylvania from the last time were so screwed up that the Supreme Court came in and say, no, we're going to redo this in a fair way. And that was done. It was done by court order about 4 years ago. So that's why we have new maps in Philadelphia that were one of the reasons that we had new members of Congress from the Philadelphia area. So it's a very important process because the groups of people like Latinos who really have surged in Pennsylvania, like we're now more than 1 million people in Pennsylvania, but that number is not represented in the state legislature. We should have more people representing us in the state legislature, according to our numbers. But because we get left out of those maps redoing, we lose out. So they put every Latino into one district and they say that's it. Or the other thing they do is that they disperse us into separate districts, so you don't have the strength to be able to elect 1 or 2 people in a district.
So what do you think of the fact that Republicans actually are controlling to a very large extent how this is distributed?
So that's the problem, because if you've been paying attention to the Republicans in the last 2 years, they're not very much on democracy with a small d. They pretty much, it's a cult of Donald Trump and a pursuit of staying on power at whatever it costs. Stop people from voting, make the boundaries in a way that you cannot elect people that they don't like. But look what happened in Texas. The entire, Texas won 2 more seats according to the census. They're going to be adding 2 more seats to the congressional delegation.
Right.
And all of the growth, according to the census and people who analyze the data, all of the growth of population in Texas were Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. And the plan that the state legislature in Texas put together dilute all of that growth. They don't get represented. It's like the status quo. Texas is going to be in Washington. If they get away with it, they're going to be a lot more whiter than they are now.
Right.
A lot more Republican than they are now. And that's just, it's unfair. And they're not hiding it. I mean, before they used to kind of give excuses and try to hide it, but now they're upfront saying this is what we want to do.
Well, that's one of the problems we have with Texas right now, along with the abortion issue and education and whatnot. We're going to take a brief pause here en Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez en compañía de Pedro Rodríguez. Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento. Don Pedro, estamos de regreso aquí en Usa la Radio con Pedro Rodríguez. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. Bueno, estamos hablando de la política. Pedro, you were talking about Texas, but I mean, we have problems here, immediate problems in Pennsylvania. And one of them is, who's going to decide on a couple of things that are coming down the pike. This redistricting and also the distribution of the $1 trillion dedicated to the infrastructure. How is that going to affect us?
Thank you for those questions. That's a very important question. Just let me finish on the redistricting side. I don't want people to get the idea that nothing is being done from the people's side. There are a number of coalitions and organizations in the city and the state that have been working hard to make sure that we have fair and equitable representation at the congressional level and the state level as well as there's a couple of maps being planned around for the city. There are a couple of community groups that have been involved in that. Like SEBA is involved in that process from our community behalf. Angel Ortiz has been playing a leading role like he did before. Easy Colon has been involved in that. So there's a lot of young activists in the Latino community who are really taking to heart to make sure that we have a voice. At least we can be heard. And then we're putting together a couple of maps with some coalitions of people. I think maybe we can put on your website some of the draft maps that have been around, so people get an idea and they can play around with it. Some of them. So that is happening. I believe that we're going to end up in the courts again in Pennsylvania. The courts has been really good on this, but I think that moving forward, the best solution for this kind of problem, Fernando, is to take that out of the hands of the legislature and put it in an independent body that's nonpartisan, that has binding powers in terms of the maps they come up with. That's the maps everybody's going to accept, and other states do it that way, and that avoids a lot of this, shenanigans that happen there.
Yeah.
So that's going on. So people are doing things. As for the infrastructure bill, the hard infrastructure bill, bridges, roads and telecom, and that kind of stuff. Most of the money is going to be doled out by the state. So the state will be in control of making sure that money is spent directly from the state or goes to municipality for them to do projects.
But what agency in the state? Because that is the trick. If it's a state, but it's a legislature in trouble, we are in Pennsylvania.
It's not so much in control of the legislator. It's the executive branch that will handle most of the money.
Okay,
So
like
it
the
would be,
treasurer. Is it a Pennsylvania treasurer, for
or
instance?
PennDOT, for example.
Right.
PennDOT, the Office of Economic Development, Community Development that the state has,
Okay.
those places where, the telecommunication, we want to deal with that, and then schools, the Department of Education, because a lot of money going to school to deal with a bunch of things. So there are a couple of departments, but so the governor, that's why the governor is important for this. And in Pennsylvania, we have an opportunity to elect a new governor next year. So that is why for Latinos and people who listen to your show, Fernando, is to make sure they pay attention to the governorship race. That's going to be key because there's going to be where the money gets invested, and is that investment done equitable, and is that investment also include an ability for small businesses who are Latinos or minority owned to participate in building, in rebuilding a lot of that infrastructure work. Um,
Hmm.
and by the way, to that end, um, I have been personally involved with, along with Jimmy Duran, um, who's a economic development activist in the Latino community. I just had a round conversation with John Thomas, who is the president of a association of African American contractors in the city, to put together a series of webinars in which you can invite both the federal, elected officials and the state to talk about how the project's going to be bidded out and what would be the guarantees that they're going to make sure that minority participation on those projects happens. Well, let me tell you something about that. So, one of the reasons, one, when there are big projects like that, we traditionally have been like, man, yeah, look at that, all that money is spent for that, and the other, we didn't get a piece of it. We complain. We always complain about it. And then you say, but why didn't you bid on it? I don't know how to build a bridge, so I'm not going to bid on building the bridges. But you know what, Fernando? Neither do the white guys who get all the money. They don't know how to build bridges. They just hire the people who know how to build the bridges, and they bid on the projects.
Right.
So we had to take the same approach and the same attitude. We cannot be waiting for someone to knock on the door and say, "Hey, you want to bid on this?" We had to be upfront there. We had to be on the table. We had to be, knocking on the door or busting through the door
Okay. In the
to
same
make it in
context, though,
that we can listen to.
Pedro, in that context of who's going to work, who's going to be employed to fix the roads and bridges and
Well,
build better schools and all that, in that role, the unions in this city play a big part. The electricians union, the
so Fernando,
roofers
yeah,
union. Yeah,
every
no, no,
every every
don't
federal project.
Pedro,
No, no,
do not dismiss that because that is,
no, no,
you
no,
know,
no, no.
we have
You
been
can't
trying
dismiss it.
for years to get people,
No,
minorities in the union. Come
no.
on.
Listen, every federal project has to have union labor. That's a given. Now, the fight would be what accommodation do we make? So let's say like Lou Rodriguez, who has an engineering firm, he gets a project. He's going to hire a bunch of minority subcontractors, people who can do different parts from the Latino community and the African American community as well. And there has to be some accommodation. He got the contract, and so if the union come in, okay, so you're going to give membership cards to all of these people that I hire, and that's the fight that's going to happen. That fight going to happen in public too. So
Yeah, well, I still think that for years now, for decades, because as a member of the board of Congreso, we tried many times to have people accepted into some of the unions, and they were rejected. It was very difficult to get trainees into the unions.
I say
That has
that,
changed. Are you going to tell me that changed?
but the problem is that we always think within the box. So historically, there has been when, and that has happened in the history of this country before, when there were racial barriers to people of color getting into unions, those groups formed their own unions. You know, be recognized as anybody else, as Let's form a union of Latino laborers. Let's form a union of Latino plumbers and that kind of stuff. So we can do this. It's not rocket science. If they prevent enough from joining it, so we can organize ourselves and be recognized by the Department of Labor of the U.S. and that's the end of it. And then you have a union.
We have such entities right now, a Latino union of roofers or electricians.
They are, for example, Luna is a Luna, which is labor unions. It's an international union. It's mostly Latinos, basically.
Okay.
So there are a couple of, but you can start local just in Philly. It doesn't have to be a national.
I know, but you say you can start. I mean, what I want to say is this is urgent because the funds are coming down the pike as we speak, and so who's going to control the flow?
We can do that simultaneously. Yeah. Let's get on the door. And we'll figure out what step we need to do once we're in the door, once we're inside the room. We don't have to have every T crossed and every I dotted before we get in.
Right.
And then that's why we have to think in a way that is new, is different. No, we're going to do this. We deserve to do that. We deserve to be awarded this work. We're going to do it. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're in compliance, that we do it, and the people doing the work get paid honorably.
Right. But I think we need, certainly, I haven't seen a large movement of the unions to accept trainees from minorities. Have you?
No, that hasn't changed. And then even despite the demand for labor that is going now, and
in fact, they boycott any enterprise that doesn't hire union workers, and they put that big rat outside the building. Have you seen those signs?
I see the rats
right.
at the Capital Construction site.
Exactly. So I don't see much change in that aspect. Now,
but they would not. If it's another union doing the work, they would not do that.
Yeah.
If it's another union doing the work, they would not do that.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily that I am anti-union. To be clear, it's only I am anti exclusivity. Why are they not including everybody?
The other thing you should know that there's been some change in leadership in the construction trades, the building trades in Philadelphia.
Right.
So it's now an African American individual who's the head of the building trades, who's part of the laborers union, which is mostly African American union.
Yeah, I think one of my next projects should be to bring one of those people here and have a conversation about this. What's happening? So.
Absolutely, I think we should do that. We should talk more explicitly about not aspirational thing, but what are you doing specifically to make sure that this happens?
Exactly.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. See, that worries me when you agree with me.
Hey, you're getting old.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, están escuchando la mesa redonda, The Roundtable, con Fernando Mendez. Pedro Rodríguez nos acompaña el día de hoy. Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. Regresamos en un minuto.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay? Just go to the site.
A menos de un minuto saber si está usted en riesgo de padecer prediabetes. Puede averiguarlo aquí. Visite esta página.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, desde la ciudad del amor fraternal, from the city of brotherly love. Fernando Mendez, en compañía de Pedro Ramos. Yes, don Pedro.
It's sisterly affection.
Sisterly affection. Yeah, well, see, in Spanish, amor fraternal, I don't know if it,
amor filial.
It's just masculine, amor fraternal,
masculine,
brotherly love, and sisterly affection. Okay, well, you know what? I worry about all these LGBTQ, PS, I don't know. It's like we're running out of letters to include everybody. In the end, we end up in the same place where we started. So,
But there's nothing wrong with that.
no, I say there's?
I'm just saying there's nothing
I'm just
wrong with
worried about running out of letters in the alphabet. Anyway, Don Pedro, since we were talking about the inability of Republicans to gain power in this city, but their ability to control the state legislature, I want to say that you mentioned this in passing, the fact that Republicans are doing a lot of things around the country to affect the next elections in 22 and 24. They don't like the results of the 2020 election, and they have undertaken the task of changing the way the votes are counted, who counts the votes, how they are processed, etc. They have managed to do that state by state, and the Democrats don't seem properly alarmed about this. So what do you say?
Well, as you can imagine, my reaction to undermining democracy by state law. I mean, for example, in Georgia, if the legislature does not like the result of the election in one county, they cannot return that. They're returning the will of the people. So that's totally anti-democratic.
Exactly.
It's dictatorial. And I agree with you. The Democrats didn't seem to be alarmed the way that they should be, and have failed to kind of make the point in the Senate, because the House of Representatives has spoken about that because they have legislation to make sure that doesn't happen. And we had two people holding out in the Senate, Senators Manchin and our colleague, Sinema from Arizona, holding back on making any fundamental change to make sure that the federal government and the laws of this country do not allow the will of the people to be subverted that way. I'm afraid to think what will happen if for example, the result of the next presidential election in Fulton County in Georgia, where Atlanta is part of, get annulled. They say, okay, those votes don't count. We want this candidate to win, and not the one that they had the most votes. Exactly. And because of the laws that they already passed, they can do that.
Yes.
What will happen? I mean, really, what is going to be the end result, of how is people going to react? Is it going to lead to violence? The other side to that is that all of those changes are also under the threat of violence by the right-wing militias that have been associated with it. So you could have a situation in which the state of Georgia say the votes in Fulton County do not count. We're going to name another candidate. And then all those right-wing militia from the rural areas of Georgia, they go into Atlanta to enforce that. We are on the precipice of a civil war, basically.
Right. Yeah, we saw at least in one state right now where they went directly to the governor's mansion to.
In Michigan, that happened in Michigan. That's another location.
So,
and then, the United States just hosted, and then, maybe with good intention, Biden hosted this summit for democracy. And although there were a couple of speakers from the United States saying, we are in the middle of this threat.
Yes.
I think it was a little bit disingenuous to try to dictate to the rest of the world how to be a democratic state when you allowing this to happen in your own backyard. It's, give lessons to the Venezuelans. They should do this. It reminds me of Henry Kissinger back in the 1973 saying that the Chileans do not know how to vote. We're going to teach them. And they went and overthrew Allende and put Pinochet in because they didn't like the result of the votes. We're back to that kind of situation, both externally and internally. Yeah. I was wondering what's going to happen in Honduras now. Is the United States going to sit back and allow the government of Honduras that was duly elected by the people of Honduras to stay? Remember the last time that the people of Honduras elected their own representative, the Obama administration allowed coup d'etat to happen. And then some of the same people who were managing foreign policy then, they're back in Biden's office. You know, they're back there. Those people are not changed. So, you know, Malcolm X was the one who said that, you know, chickens coming home to roost, right? And basically, after, you know, spreading all undemocratic things, overthrowing governments overseas, a lot of that stuff is just coming back here. So it ties back to what's happening in Georgia, what happened in Texas, what happened in other states in which the legislature run by Republicans are assuming total control of the electoral process and are saying that they're going to make sure that their candidates win and not somebody else.
But Pedro, you didn't mention Nicaragua, and you know that's one election that was crooked, and we haven't done anything about that. I believe that that's one place where we probably should have intervened.
Intervene how? I mean, you're going to send troops?
Help the people to cancel that government, because that is anti-democratic.
Well, I mean, the United States
anti-democratic. You like it. You like it because it's one of your compinches from the left. But
I think
that was a crooked election. Come on.
I think Daniel Ortega has outlived his usefulness to progressive movements around the world.
Right. But he's a bad representative of the progressives. Yes.
Yeah. But Fernando, my point is you can't have it both ways. The United States cannot be deciding who's good and who's bad, and doing the same way that they did it for decades. Yeah. They have 100 years of, you know, putting this one and putting that one in Latin America. And except for Honduras, they did it recently, a couple of years back. There's a little appetite for that, even though they want to do it. He just can't do it as easy as he used to be.
Pedro,
because even people who don't agree, whoever they have it, they say this is our problem. We're gonna deal with it, and that's the best way. Let them deal with it. But look, last night I was watching the BBC News. They had an interview with the two journalists who won the Nobel Peace Prize for this year. The woman from the Philippines and the gentleman from Russia. And the moderator of the interview said, but you know, those two leaders, Putin and Duarte, they have an amazing amount of public support. I mean, Duterte has almost 70%, and Putin has about 60% of the population supporting them. And the responses were really good. This is how you really understand that you're in tune with the people. So what has happened in the case of the Philippines is that the right-wing apparatus in the state control social media messaging, and they overwhelm anything else. The traditional means of people getting information and getting facts have been subverted, and they're now in the decline, like these newspapers, TV news, radio news. So most of the people in the Philippines consume news from their cell phones and through Facebook in the case of the Philippines. And that has kind of created this false reality. And then she said, the woman from the Philippines, the journalist say, people in the Philippines, an overwhelming majority of the Philippines believe that Duterte is the best president in the world. That nobody else, no other leader in the world stage is better than him. And the same thing in Russia. I mean, if Putin is seen as someone who's defending the national honor, blah, blah, standing up to bullies. And it's because they have created through social media that impression. It doesn't mean that they're right. It does not mean that they're correct. But it does mean that journalists should continue to strive to get to the facts and put the truth out, rather than accept what is the popular thing, the opinion polls, what it's saying. And to the extent that we do not understand that, then we're going to be trying to prescribing the wrong policies on how you come out of that.
Well, the fact is, right, that social media has changed in so many ways the way leaders control their images. In the case of Putin, particularly, and look at what's it, North Korea. They also don't get the news. They don't get anything. They're only allowed to listen to whatever the state wants to tell them. So anyway, we don't want to be that way in this country. We have right now Facebook.
We were on our way to that with Trump.
Yeah, what happened with Trump was that social media enabled him to manipulate the country, manipulate public opinion for such a long time. As soon as he was off Twitter, there was like clean air. All of a sudden, like pollution was clean. So it's a very important role now that social media plays, and it's undeniable that's what helped Mr. Trump to do what he did, and what he's still trying to do, because every day we see more and more evidence. And I would like to talk about this for a little bit, about the January 6th committee and what's happening there. But even now, Mr. Trump, from his hideaway in Mar-a-Lago, is trying to control what is said, what is done in the Republican Party. And to a large extent, he's successful. Why? Because the leaders are afraid of him. McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham and all these people are afraid of Trump.
They're totally afraid of Trump. I mean, it's not the Republican Party, it's the Trump Party. They should change the name. And that's why, for example, there is a vacancy on the office that runs elections in Philadelphia. That by charter you have 2 majority party members and 1 minority party member.
Right.
I do not believe that Republicans should be rewarded in Philadelphia by the mayor appointing a Republican to that vacancy. The mayor can appoint someone from the Green Party or someone from the Working Families Party, and that will satisfy the requirements of the city charter. We got to make a clean break. I mean, if you're not going to stand up for democracy, then you should not be awarded plum perks when you can do otherwise. I mean, it's if you do not announce what's going on, you'll be an accomplice to what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you can't be doing that. I mean, there's definitely people pay homage to Trump, and then they go and they kneel before him. It's like that TV guy now running for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. The guy lives in New Jersey. He wants to be the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, and he's talking a lot of nonsense.
The doctor?
Yeah, whatever that guy name is.
Yeah, so, we don't want to give his name.
Look at the idiotic thing that he says.
I know.
He's running against Washington. Washington closed down the country. Well, that happened when Trump was in office, right?
Right.
And so he tried to make it look like Biden is the one who closed down the country.
But even his medical advice is questionable. So
he's a quack doctor.
Yes. So Pedro, we're going to take another break here en USLA Radio. Estamos en compañía de Pedro Rodríguez. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Dana Gramos controla la máquina. Regresamos en un minuto.
You ever had this food before, or it's like the first time you were here?
Yes,
couple times.
Yep.
Yeah. So what do you order right now? Which one?
We got the chicken tikka masala
Yeah, I got the
and the butter masala.
Oh, so the Indian and Pakistani food is a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
So you tolerate the spice or everything?
I like spice, but we got the mild.
Oh, okay. So it's
But I can do spice.
and you?
Yeah,
Like
I
spice?
mean, I can somewhat handle spice. Not too much, so that's why I got the mild.
Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Round Table, from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, as Don Pedro Rodriguez, who is my guest, insists that we are the brotherly love and sisterly affection city.
Right.
I like
And
that,
it-
Pedro. Actually,
And then,
yes.
Fernando, I noticed that your table is round too. It's redonda. La mesa redonda.
Do not alienate the female population. So,
The majority.
yeah, I love women. You know, I feel like was the comedian George Burns? He, to the end of his life, he said, "I still chase women, except I don't remember why." So anyway, Don Pedro, one more segment. We're going to talk about this because what's going on in Washington with the January 6th commission, and more and more documents reveal that there was actually a planned coup. That January 6th event was not accidental. It was planned. It was from above, as high up as the president, and that's what is being put into evidence right now with some of the documents, the memos, the statements, the witnesses. So I can't wait to see that report.
I can't wait to see it either. I mean, actually, Fernando, we should translate it into Spanish. I mean, that should become a book so people in Latin America can read it.
And that's absolutely. I
mean, definitely, yeah. That's a project we should. I mean, that information needs to get out.
Yes.
This is. I heard a commentator the other day say the following: the only reason they did not succeed is because they were a bunch of incompetents. It's like Keystone Cops. For those of you who are too young to remember the comedy black and white with Keystone Cops, it's like it sounds. You know, they were inept, incompetent buffoons. So that's why they did not succeed. If they had been someone with some brains who know how to organize things, we would have dictator Trump as president right now. But it was it's laughable sometimes, but it's really scary. It's really scary. And then, in my opinion, there were parts of the army and the Pentagon that were in it. They wanted to see that happen and maybe intervene on the side of Trump once his stuff was allowed. Some of the insurrectionists had weapons stashed outside DC to go get in and come in and then start the fight. They had a number of steps already developed steps on how to do this from a legal, quote unquote, standpoint, and also just by force. So we came very, very close to Biden's victory being denied. I mean, we were lucky that some people did not go along with it, like Mike Pence. He was convinced by someone not other than Dan Quayle that he had no legal authority to do anything about certifying the vote. But you remember that if the state legislator like Arizona had acted on the plan that they had, they could have sent in an alternate set of electors. They didn't manage to organize that. They were so inept that they could not do that. So you would have had, if they had acted on, they would have had two competing set of electors, and then the House of Representatives decide which one that was set.
Right.
Imagine that.
And the danger right now is if we have a similar situation and it has to go to the Supreme Court, the trouble is, look who's in control of the Supreme Court right now. So that would help us.
And the other thing is that the State Department, I don't know where their heads are. Where are they going with this? I mean, they kind of taking a backseat attitude, as if this is nothing to do with the law. Like
Right.
it's a political fight. Well, it's
Right.
not. I mean,
It's
crimes
not.
were committed here, and then crimes should be prosecuted. That's the
Yeah.
role they should have.
Yeah, I agree. Look, you were talking about democracy before and about how it would be tough for the United States to sell democracy to the world in view of the situation, the internal situation here. I believe, however, that the core of this nation is democratic. Our principles are democratic. Our ideals are democratic. Our constitution that rules everything is still a democratic ideal. That it has suffered, it has been dented by sort of an outrageous president who should have never been in power. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the right to promote democracy elsewhere.
But it's what I don't, what I, you know, I sort of agree with you. But what happens is that this is we have been promoting some ideals of democracy, but not the practice of democracy, because we don't respect the will of other people. And then remember that this country was never truly democratic from the beginning. Only white men who own land could vote. And then over time, that was changed to include women, to include people who did not own land, then to include minorities. And then that was always, it never really followed through in a way that was easy for people to exercise the right to vote. And maybe this particular way of government is not suitable for every society. You know, you try to have people dignity is respected in every place, but you know, I mean, Juan Bosch, who was the leader in the Dominican Republic, he published a thesis which called that representative democracy, as we know it, could not succeed in places like the Dominican Republic. That you needed another form of structure to allow the society to progress to another stage. So people should experiment with other forms of government that have the support and understanding of the people. We should not be imposing what works, supposedly works here, on other people. You know, look what happened in Palestine. The Bush administration insisted on having elections there. They insisted, election. Know what happened? Hamas win the elections, and then they don't like the results. But you know what? You know, something that was working at the time, but you try to subvert that, and then the results are more catastrophic than what you had before.
Yeah, well, it's a good example of how we took the wrong policy there. So I agree with you.
It's believing that election solves everything, but it's you know, it's not in every society.
I still think that government by the people is still the best way to govern. As Winston Churchill said, you know, democracy is the worst system except for all the others, and that's where we are right now. I think that democracy, with all the faults that it has, it still has to offer the best hope for mankind to rule ourselves, to defend ourselves. So
well, the Roman thought that they had a very good system, and it lasted 1,000 years. So so it's everything with the historical context, you know.
Yeah, well, I think you have to come back, and then we have this debate all over again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean this is great. I love this kind of discussion because it's more along philosophical lines, the philosophy of government. How do we choose to govern ourselves? And I think you give a good example of where democracy, the vote didn't work in Palestine, but for the most part, it does work. Anyway, Pedro, I want to thank you for coming on our program. Hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you. And then if you have not gotten your booster shot, this is a good time to do it.
I got it. Yeah,
This next Saturday, they're going to be a booster clinic at the West Kensington Ministry from 9 o'clock to 12 noon. That's 2100 block of Hancock, corner with Susquehanna. So come on by. I'm also going to have vaccine for children. And if you haven't had your vaccine, which is unthinkable that you haven't had the first shot, come in there, and get it.
Okay. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for coming on our show. Se despide Fernando Mendez en compañía de Pedro Rodríguez y Dani Ramos, que controló la máquina digital. Hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.